Well, our guest for this first segment is Officer Jesse Guardiola with the Tulsa Police Department. Jesse, it's good to have you.
Good to see you, sir.
How are you doing? It's been a while.
Yes. Happy New Year.
And to you.
Yep, it's exciting times, as we were just talking about, to live in, and we are aggressively trying to both recruit, diversify, and address needs in the community that 2017 ended up being something of I don't want to say a crisis, but things that need to be addressed when it comes to relationship building.
Has the fear factor grown in the Hispanic community over the last time we talked?
Every time that you have those in leadership that tout the fire, if you will, of turning people's lives into a political football, the Hispanic community starts to huddle. More so in a way that they fear that they're being hunted. I can speak on different occasions where I've visited with different Hispanic parents at different school outreach meetings, and the first question, that's asked is Tulsa Police involved, or are we going to be involved in mass deportations? Are we going to get involved in and some of the things are being talked about? Are our DACA kids going to be sought after by law enforcement to if this thing does not go through? And of course, you have to calm the fears and tell them that's not who we are. It's not what we're here for. But it just tells you what a lot of what's going around the kitchen table in these homes. You have first generation American Hispanic kids who continuously ask me when I see them in presentations. I can think of one just recently. I was at one of the local middle schools here. There were kids ranging between the age of 9 to 14. And I was giving a presentation. The educators had brought together about 70 to 75 Hispanic kids to see a police officer in uniform. And typically, when I give these types of presentations, I'm in full gear, and I'm going to explain to them, what the uniform looks like, and answer a lot of questions that just deal with what police officers wear when it comes to what the functionality of the uniform to the star, to the patch, and so when I opened it up for the Q&A session, a 9-year-old boy raises his hand up. And at that point, I had a bunch of kids who had raised their hands up, but this 9-year-old boy raises his hands up, and I point to him and said, yes. And without skipping a beat, he looks at me, and this was at the time that the presidential election was taking place. He says, if so-and-so wins the election, will you and your police officer friends hunt my parents? And I looked at we're talking a 9 to 10-year-old boy.
Heartbreaking, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you, the rest of the kids lowered their hands, looked at him, then looked at me to see what the response was going to be. And I had to explain to him and just calming these fears of all these children and saying, no, that's not what we're here for. And we're talking about American kids. These were all first-generation Hispanic Americans, Oklahomans. But it just spoke to me. It was heartbreaking, and then it spoke to me on what these kids are being conditioned with, not only in fearing police, but relationship with police moving forward if they're being conditioned to think that law enforcement is there to separate them from their parents.
When you and I talked, what was it, about a year ago?
Yes, sir.
You brought up something that absolutely floored me when you talked about the fear in the Hispanic households and how youngsters try not to excel with their grades or with any sport activity or musical activity because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. And they're fully capable of breaking the norm, of excelling, if you will, but they don't want their family in jeopardy. Is that still the case?
That is still the case, but we're starting to see more and more in Hispanic gang growth because of that unity that they are being told within Hispanic gangs that they will get that they may not be getting from outside resources. Right now I'm working with a 14-year-old Hispanic boy who's been carrying a gun since he was 10 years old. And he's been shot at. He's shot at people. But he and I go through these sessions of just me trying to understand, why would a 10-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy feel like that carrying a gun is something that is going to benefit him in the future. And for him, he'd be the first to tell me that the only one that understands me are my fellow gang members. My parents don't understand me because they don't know what it's like to be born in this country, first generation. So for him, it's that unity that he gets. And unfortunately, the growth that we're seeing when it comes to Hispanic gangs, because they don't see what the future looks like staying in school. What they're being told and conditioned, unfortunately, is that if you join us, we'll protect you, and we will be unified against those that don't want us.
This is not a trick question that I'm about to ask you, but should we consider Tulsa a sanctuary city?
I've never, the way I'd like to look at Tulsa, because I've never really thought it out as far as consider us a sanctuary city. I think it's the thing that keeps me up at night is that first generation American child that doesn't feel that this country is his. And how do we make sure that we don't repeat the transgressions that we have done to other minority kids in the past? And learn from those past experiences so that we can build relationships with these kids moving forward as productive American citizens, as future police officers, as future taxpayers. That's what I want.
I will give you a tool for your toolbox. There was a time in this country when the American Indian was considered the scourge, if you will, of humanity. And it wasn't until a trial in the federal courts involving Chief Standing Bear, and the ruling of the court was, I declare that you are a human being. That's still on the books. It did not change in that generation or the next, but it began to evolve with the young ones. The young ones made it happen. The young ones made it change. And they did away with Indian schools. They did away with isolation and segregation. It became what the Statue of Liberty wants us to see happen. I don't know how you carry the burden into the Hispanic neighborhoods or into the minds of these children, but if that's a tool you can use, I strongly suggest the trial of Standing Bear.
The history of Native America, the history of African Americans, the history of the Irish. I mean, I even use some of that in my curriculum when teaching at the police academy and helping my cadets understand that because of potato famine, they came here and lay down roots. And I asked my police cadets, how many of you have Irish backgrounds? Of course, I usually have at least a third. Germans, that was the largest concentration of immigrants that came to Oklahoma during the land run. How many of you are Germans? And you came because of political strife. Helping them understand our history, using your example, I think really helps galvanize a lot of these future officers that want to make a difference in understanding our history and just helping them understand that now it's just a different border and a different type of immigrant, a different type of people that are trying to reach that pinnacle, which in some cases we just say middle class, and being able to have the American dream.
I get the distinct feeling the Tulsa Police Department is going out of its way to support education with the minorities. Am I reading that correctly?
No, yes, sir. It's a cause and effect. If you keep them in school, two things will happen. One, they're off the
About 30
streets.
seconds. Go ahead.
They're off the streets. They're working towards a productive future. The second is less gang growth. So understanding that if we keep them in school, the probability of them turning out as and not productive American citizens, keeping them in school gives us more of an opportunity to, one, recruit them in the future, but at the same time becoming future taxpayers, as opposed to us having to pay for their incarceration.
You know, old friend, I've noticed a few more gray hairs since we talked the last time. Hey, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
You're
And
a
thank you
good
for having
man.
me on, Sam.
Again, we want you back down the road.
I would like that very much.
You're a good man.
Thank you.
Short break, and we'll be back with more right after this.